So we have a problem in today's car world. No one buys sedans anymore. And that's because people, they want practicality. But here's the flaw with that logic. Practicality is not just limited to the shape or how many packaging pieces can go in a box, it's also how much that box costs. Okay, that's all fine and good, but why is this a problem? Well, you may or may not have missed the memo, but the average price of a new car in today's day and age is $50,000. Well, that doesn't have to be the case because there are vehicles that look like this. This is a new Kia, the Kia K4. It replaces what you and I used to know as the Kia Forte, which was 20 grand. Even the most fancy one with a turbo engine and a manual transmission, that was 26 grand. So skipping to the headline here, one does not need to spend 50 grand to buy a new car and still have practicality. Now granted, this is a smaller car. It replaces the Forte, kind of the idea of the sizes of a Civic, a Corolla. Now they have changed a couple of things to make it let's just say more practical. If we look at this vehicle, it looks incredibly different. It looks bigger than a Civic, and there's a reason why. Number one, yes, it is 2 inches longer. An inch of that is in the wheelbase where you package people and dogs. But notice you look at it and say, wait a minute, that looks way bigger than the Civic. Why? Because of a design trick that the industry doesn't like to tell you about, and it's called proportions. You look at this vehicle and yeah, it's about the same size of cars you've seen on the road. However, it looks different because there are proportions. And a great example of that, here is a small car that has hips. They usually don't have things like this. It's usually reserved for a car like a 911. Then that works in conjunction with oddly placed lines. Like notice there is a curvature to the roof which looks very much like other Kias. They even have the typical Kia larger, wider sunroof. But then they have this very vertical line, very hard line. It almost looks, you guys remember the last generation of Cadillac Eldorado? Yes, I am dating myself here. This is straight out of a Cadillac Eldorado. Then you look here, it's a very fast line of backlight, and you would think it's a hatchback. There you would be wrong. I know we could probably have a discussion about that. We'll get to this whole thing later. But in terms of design, you put all of these pieces together, especially with, there's like lines up here that mimic the haunches in the back, and that's what gives it all the proportion and makes it look bigger than it really is. And now we press on to the bits that haven't changed at least a lot. Here there are 2 engines. Notice I don't say propulsion systems because currently there aren't any hybrids or EV options, which is to say a good thing. We've got 2 4-cylinder engines. We've got the 2-liter 4-cylinder Atkinson cycle. That one is unchanged at 147 horsepower, 132 pounds of torque. Now, huge thing to point out here. The fuel economy on the Forte was good. It was like low 40s with the CVT, which we're not excited about, but that's the point of the CVT, to increase the fuel economy and lower the warranty costs for the car manufacturer, even though they don't tell you that part. Well, the product manager I spoke to on the car is saying they're targeting the same fuel economy for a car we've learned now is bigger and probably will be heavier. As a basis of comparison, the Forte was anywhere between 2,700 pounds and just under 3,100 pounds. Then we have this engine. This is the 1.6 turbo, which we have come to know and love from the Hyundai Kia group. This one, I've got good news and I got bad news. The good news is we have a turbocharger and we have a real transmission with this one, an 8-speed with a torque converter. The bad news is actually 2 pieces of bad news. Number one, no manual transmission. Believe it or not, there was a manual transmission in the Forte and the GT model. Even I forgot about it. And then number 2, previously it was 201 horsepower. Now it's down to 190 horsepower, still with 195 pounds of torque. Why is that? Well, they had to tweak the emissions, as we've learned, like with the Porsche Cayenne S. They did away with the V6, came out with the 8-cylinder, not because they want to give you a more powerful engine, because they need to meet stricter emissions in different regions of the world, and that's what had to change here. And now we have to press on to more pedestrian bits, and that would be the wheels. Here you are looking at the fanciest wheels on offer. These are the 18-inch wheels. Now notice this one has the black on it. It's got a certain design for the GT Turbo. From what I've learned from the product manager of the car, there are going to be 5 different wheel designs on offer. But what's very important to know, this is a small car. It's going to be a car. It's probably going to be $20,000, $21,000, $22,000 to start. So don't expect every car to have 18-inch wheels. They range from 16s, 17s to 18s. Inside is as big of a change as it is outside. Here they've taken a lot of design inspiration from the EV9. If you look at the dashboard, not just the screen, but also all of the tactile inputs, like the roller for the volume, some of the hard buttons they have, not just for the applications, but also for the HVAC. So the idea here is, yeah, you've got the screens, which the kids want these days, but it still is taken into account. You got to keep your eyes on the road. So toggle switches for the temperature, the mode for the HVAC, the fan, all fantastic touches. Then there are the screens. What you are looking at is the most expensive car. So of course, you get the most screens. Here, 12.3, 12.3, and 5 inches. Now let's say for the sake of discussion, you and I are cheapskates, and yes, you guys know I am a cheapskate. The most basic one still has the 12.3 here, which is kind of interesting, but over there that goes to 7 inches and it's still all digital. I actually clarified with the product manager. He said it was just the speedometer and the tach, and I said, so that means it's got a regular gas gauge, which I'd love to see. It'd be kind of like retro, but I guess they're not going to do that. Then there's the center console. This is another aspect that's been pilfered from the EV9, but not from a design point of view, rather functionality. Those of you that are into Circle K, they have that subscription where you get a drink every single day if you pay by the month or something like that. That is what this is designed for, a Big Gulp holder, or their version of a Big Gulp. Then we press on to the color and trim. Surprisingly, this is not a black hole. That is just boring to be in. Notice they've got some two-tone here, like on the steering wheel, it's black and white on the console, black and white in the seats. I spoke to the product manager about this detail. He said they're doing 2 different two-tones. They got the black and white, they're doing black and red. And then, you guys know I'm a cheapskate, I had to ask about the cheap model. Turns out they're doing sort of a cloth there. I almost thought when I saw it on the screen, it was like a Pepita, like a Porsche, but no, it's like gray lines that they're doing there. Then we have to press on to something that Kia is making a huge stink about in what is going to be a basic car. This will have many of the safety features that more expensive cars have. Put that aside, to me, the thing that's more interesting, this will have over-the-air updates after the point of purchase. Back here, not a hell of a lot to discuss. Yes, somewhat functional for a 6-footer. This is the payoff of the extra inch. Now, this is where I would sit if I were driving the car. Aside from that, there is something fascinating back here specific to Kias. No, not extra charging ports on armrest, rather the backs of the seats. And now this is all of the cars they make. They have a coat rack. You literally can hang a coat from the back of the seat. This is an incredibly useful touch and a design that doesn't cost any extra. And here's the point of our story where we have to get back to what we discussed at the top of the episode, and that is the cost of all of this. The current car was anywhere between $20,000 and $26,000, but more importantly, a K5, meaning the mid-size sedan, that's a shade under $27,000. So how much can something like this be? I'm guessing somewhere between $21,000 or $22,000 and up to $28,000. Now, huge Hinweis there. The most fancy one with all the stuff on it, probably up to $28,000. I would think they still need to be less than the most inexpensive K5 because, as you guys know, I'm a big believer in I would rather be the cheap seats in the nice neighborhood rather than the fancy house in the cheap seats. Now, this is where we get to some other details that make this kind of the fancy car in the cheap seats, but some changes that I think are welcome. Like, for example, there are details where there's a satin finish here underneath a two-tone mirror, or really interesting, look at where the door handle is. This is something you would see in a large crossover that's like the coupe version. Anyway, put that all aside, let's get to the wish list here. Now, bad news, we don't get a manual transmission. We already talked about that. We could piss and moan about that, or we could look at the numbers. How many did they sell? Less than 2% of all Fortes went out with manual transmissions. That's why, like the basic one, even the fancy one's not going to get the manual transmission. However, this is what I'm asking for. Can we have an Elantra N version of this? Because you look at this, to my eye, this is a far more attractive vehicle than an Elantra N. However, you have the same platform. We can put the same engine in it. We can make this thing 300 horsepower with a manual transmission. Let's call it 32 grand. Okay, I know I'm asking for a lot here, but I think there's a market for it because you still have like GTIs that sell, but GTIs, they don't have a trunk. And I think there are people that do want a trunk, even though there would be more functionality with a hatchback here. But I'm one man. This is the point of the episode. I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all word, MotoManTV all word, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And with that, if you found this discussion fascinating, I would highly suggest you look at our episodes where I sat down with Mark and Jack from Savage Geese. And let's just say we pissed and moaned about how much cars cost nowadays, and we added a lot of facts and figures as to why things like this exist or don't exist. You can see those episodes here. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.